Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're part of our journey. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready for a story that will leave you thinking. And if you love inspiring tales, a like goes a long way. I'm sorry, but your card has been declined again. The words cut through the hushed terminal, leaving the young woman's face drained of color. Behind her, the line of tired travelers shifted uncomfortably, their collective exhaustion momentarily forgotten in the spectacle of another's desperation. The departure board flashed its cruel countdown. Flight 2187, final boarding call. Her voice trembled as she searched her wallet frantically. Please, I need to get home tonight. My father's in the hospital. The agent's face remained professionally blank, the airport's fluorescent lighting casting harsh shadows across his features. Other passengers averted their eyes, suddenly fascinated by their phones or the scuffed terminal floor. Nobody wanted to witness this particular brand of public humiliation. In the shadowed corner of the terminal, a man in a worn leather jacket lowered his book. His beard was slightly unkempt, his eyes tired but alert. He observed the scene quietly, his expression changing subtly as the young woman's shoulders began to shake. As the agent reached to return her passport, the man stepped forward, his movement deliberate. If this moment made you feel something, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like button and stay with us. Subscribe now. The terminal had taken on that peculiar quality of late-night spaces, too bright yet somehow dimmed, filled with the quiet desperation of delayed travelers. Rachel Morgan had spent her last $3 on airport coffee that tasted like warm dishwater. The card decline wasn't a surprise, but the timing was catastrophic. 14 hours ago, her sister had called. Dad had suffered another stroke, worse than before. Now, standing at the counter with her rejected card, Rachel faced the terrifying prospect of not making it home in time to say goodbye. Airport policy, ma'am. I can't issue a boarding pass without payment. The agent's voice had the practiced neutrality of someone who had delivered bad news countless times before. His name tag read Michael, though his eyes never met hers long enough for proper introduction. Behind her, someone sighed loudly. Another passenger muttered something about holding up the line. Rachel fumbled with her phone, desperately checking banking apps, knowing there was nothing left to check. A teenage girl at a nearby gate lifted her phone, angling it to capture Rachel's distress. Her friend whispered something, and they both giggled. The terminal had become an impromptu theater, Rachel the unwilling performer in some cruel spectacle. Michael's triumph was small but complete. The invisible line between those who enforce rules and those who must obey clearly drawn and enforced. A businessman now approached the counter, platinum credit card already extended, the transaction smooth and respectful. Your boarding pass, sir, Michael said with sudden warmth, his customer service voice restored. The contrast was deliberate, performative. Rachel stepped aside, unsure where to go next. Her flight would depart in 30 minutes, not enough time to miracle money into her account. Her phone vibrated with another text from her sister. Two college students whispered and pointed, recognizing something happening beyond the ordinary humiliation of missed flights. The man in the leather jacket had moved closer, now just a few feet away from the counter. His face remained partially hidden, but his attention never left the scene unfolding before him. Rachel's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Each minute that passed was another minute her father lay in a hospital bed, perhaps asking for her. The boarding gate seemed impossibly far away now, separated by an invisible wall of financial inadequacy. She had already sold her return ticket to afford this one-way flight, betting everything on getting home tonight. The final boarding announcement for Flight 2187 echoed through the terminal, each syllable falling like a gavel. A child nearby asked his mother why the lady was crying. Michael had already moved on to the next customer. Rachel's crisis merely a momentary disruption in his evening workflow. The businessman with the platinum card glanced back at her with that particular look reserved for those who create inconvenient public scenes. Rachel wiped her eyes with her sleeve, trying to preserve what dignity remained. The teenage girls had lost interest, having captured enough of her humiliation for their social media entertainment. Then, a quiet voice spoke behind her, its tone low and genuinely kind. "Excuse me," said the bearded man in the leather jacket, stepping into the fluorescent light. Several heads turned, recognition dawning slowly across their faces. Things are about to take a turn. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe, like our video, and keep watching. "I'd like to pay for her ticket," the man said, approaching the counter with a deliberate calm that seemed at odds with the terminal's frantic energy. He placed his passport beside Rachel's on the counter. Michael's professional indifference faltered, his eyes widening slightly as he registered the face that matched the passport. Around them, the airport's background noise dimmed perceptibly as attention shifted toward this unexpected development. The businessman with the platinum card took a half step back, suddenly uncertain of his place in this unfolding narrative. "Sir, Michael began, his voice losing its automated quality. The teenage girls were frantically nudging each other, phones raised again, but with a different target now. Rachel stood frozen, embarrassment and confusion washing over her in alternating waves. She studied the stranger's profile, trying to place where she'd seen that face before. The man kept his eyes on Michael, ignoring the growing ripple of whispers spreading through the terminal. "It's a one-way ticket to Sacramento," Michael continued, regaining some composure. "That's $422. "That's fine," the man replied simply, sliding a credit card across the counter. His lack of fanfare seemed to intensify the moment rather than diminish it. Rachel noticed his hands, strong but gentle in their movements. No rings or watches, nothing ostentatious. The way he stood suggested someone accustomed to being noticed, but not entirely comfortable with it. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing openly now. "Mom, isn't that—" The mother shushed him quickly, her own eyes wide with recognition. "Sir, I can't accept your money," Rachel finally managed, finding her voice. "It's too much." The terminal had grown unnaturally quiet, a collective holding of breath. The man turned to her, and in that moment recognition clicked into place. Keanu Reeves stood before her, not as John Wick or Neo, but as himself, tired from travel, beard slightly overgrown, eyes kind behind the exhaustion. His fame filled the space between them, yet somehow diminished in importance against the simple human gesture being offered. "You need to get home," he said quietly, the statement both an observation and a gentle insistence. "Family is important." The card reader beeped its approval, and Michael's fingers moved robotically across his keyboard. The businessman with the platinum card had fully retreated now, pretending to check his phone while surreptitiously angling it to capture this moment. The teenage girls had abandoned all pretense, openly recording, their previous mockery transformed into wide-eyed awe. Rachel felt tears threatening again, but different ones now, not from humiliation but from the whiplash of unexpected kindness. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered, acutely aware of the eyes on them, of the phones documenting this exchange from multiple angles. Keanu shook his head slightly, a small gesture that seemed to push away the necessity of gratitude. "I can give you my address to pay you back eventually," Rachel continued, fumbling for a pen in her bag. Michael slid the boarding pass across the counter, his earlier coldness completely evaporated, replaced by an almost reverential attentiveness. "No need for payback," Keanu said, his voice remaining low enough that people had to strain to hear. forcing a bubble of privacy in the public space. Just help someone else when you can. The words weren't delivered as a platitude, but with the weight of genuine belief. Rachel noticed a subtle weariness around his eyes that spoke of a person who had seen both the best and worst of humanity, yet still chose belief in the former. The attention of the terminal had crystallized entirely around them now, all pretense of disinterest abandoned. Michael cleared his throat, suddenly transformed into the most accommodating customer service representative imaginable. "We can expedite your boarding, Ms. Morgan. The gate is still open." The same gate that had seemed impossibly distant minutes ago now extended like a lifeline. Rachel clutched her boarding pass, its physical presence a tangible miracle. Her phone vibrated again. Another message from her sister. Time was still slipping away. Keanu stepped back, creating space for her to move, to continue her journey without further delay. "My father's had a stroke," Rachel found herself explaining, though she hadn't meant to share this with a stranger, celebrity or not. "The doctors don't know if he'll—" She stopped, unable to complete the sentence. Around them, the audience of travelers leaned in imperceptibly, consuming this moment of raw vulnerability. The teenage girls had lowered their phones slightly, their expressions shifting from excitement to something more complex. The businessman with the platinum card looked down, perhaps recognizing his earlier judgment in a new, uncomfortable light. Keanu's expression remained steady, free of the pity Rachel had come to dread, offering instead a simple understanding that required no further explanation. "This story is only getting deeper. What would you do in this situation? Comment below, and let's talk." "I lost my father when I was young," Keanu said, his voice carrying a depth that silenced the terminal completely. The simple statement hung in the air, transforming the celebrity encounter into something profoundly human. He wasn't performing or posturing for the cameras that had emerged throughout the terminal. This wasn't a calculated PR moment. It was a genuine connection formed in the sterile transient space of Gate 14. The businessman with the platinum card slipped his phone back into his pocket, suddenly ashamed of his impulse to record. "Go be with your family," Keanu continued, gesturing gently toward the gate. "That's what matters now." The words carried the weight of someone who understood loss intimately, who recognized the precious value of moments that couldn't be recovered once lost. Rachel nodded, unable to speak around the knot in her throat. The large departure board flickered above them. Flight 2187, final call. Michael stepped out from behind his counter, something he'd likely never done before, and personally gestured toward the jetway. "I'll escort you to the plane, Ms. Morgan," he said, his earlier bureaucratic rigidity completely dissolved. The terminal had become a stage for something rare and unexpected, a moment of genuine human connection cutting through the typical theater of public spaces. The teenage girls who had mockingly recorded Rachel's distress earlier now stood with phones lowered, their expressions chastened. One wiped at her eyes surreptitiously. The child who had recognized Keanu tugged at his mother's sleeve again, but this time with a different question. "Mom, why is that lady crying? Is she happy or sad?" "Both, sweetheart," the mother answered softly, the simple truth resonating through the terminal. Rachel gathered her courage and extended her hand to Keanu, who took it without hesitation. Their handshake was brief but genuine, a contract of humanity rather than commerce. Rachel noticed how he made eye contact without demanding it, how he stood straight but not imposing. The qualities that made him a star were evident, but overshadowed by something far more rare: authentic kindness without performance. "Thank you," Rachel said, knowing the words were insufficient but offering them anyway. Not just for the ticket, for understanding. Keanu nodded once, a gesture that acknowledged the depths beneath her simple statement. He didn't offer platitudes about her father's recovery or make promises about fate. Instead, he simply respected the gravity of her journey home. The businessman who had earlier radiated impatience now stood quietly reflective, witnessing something that his platinum card couldn't purchase. A moment of genuine connection that cut through status and celebrity. "Safe travels," Keanu said, stepping back to create space for her departure. Around them, the audience of accidental witnesses remained unusually still. No one pushed forward for autographs or selfies, recognizing intuitively that this moment wasn't about celebrity spotting. Michael gestured again toward the gate, his body language now respectful rather than dismissive. "We need to go now, Miss Morgan," he said, the same words that might have been delivered with bureaucratic indifference now spoken with genuine concern. Rachel nodded, picking up her small carry-on. She took 3 steps toward the gate, then turned back once more. "I promised to pass it forward," she said, loud enough for Keanu to hear but not performatively projected for the crowd. He responded with that slight smile, now famous across the internet. Genuine but reserved, reaching his eyes without overtaking them. No words were necessary. The teenage girls who had mocked Rachel's distress earlier now stood with a new awareness dawning on their faces. One deleted the video she'd taken of Rachel's breakdown, a small private gesture of growth that no one else witnessed. The mother, explaining to her curious child, pointed subtly toward Keanu and whispered something about kindness being stronger than fame. Rachel disappeared down the jetway with Michael, the physical distance between her and the terminal growing with each step. But something had changed in that space, something that remained after she was gone. Conversations resumed gradually, but with a different quality, more muted, more thoughtful. The businessman with the platinum card approached the counter next, his earlier entitled demeanor noticeably softened. When the attendant apologized for the delay, he responded, "No problem at all. Take your time." The words were simple, but delivered with new awareness. Keanu retreated to his corner seat, picking up his book again. He didn't acknowledge the stares or whispers, didn't play to the audience that had witnessed his act of kindness. This hadn't been about performance or recognition. The teenage girls approached him cautiously, phones conspicuously put away. "We're sorry to bother you," one began, her voice carrying a new humility. "We just wanted to say thank you for helping that woman. It was..." She searched for the right word. "Beautiful." Keanu looked up, his expression warm but still private. "We all need help sometimes," he said simply. "It's what makes us human." The words hung in the air as the final boarding call for his own flight echoed through the terminal. "It's not over yet. The best part is coming. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it." Three hours later, Rachel sat beside her father's hospital bed, holding his frail hand. She had made it in time. The monitors beeped steadily, each tone a small victory, a moment preserved. Her sister dozed in the corner chair, exhausted from days of solitary vigil. Outside the window, Sacramento's lights twinkled in the darkness. Rachel's phone had been buzzing continuously since she'd landed. Notifications from social media platforms she rarely checked. Messages from friends sharing links to videos titled Keanu Reeves' amazing airport act of kindness. The videos had already accumulated hundreds of thousands of views, each comment section filled with a surprising depth of reflection rather than the usual internet snark. People shared stories of moments when strangers had helped them, of times when they'd looked away from someone in need, of resolutions to be more present, more aware. Rachel hadn't watched the videos. She didn't need to. She had lived the moment. Instead, she concentrated on the rhythm of her father's breathing, on the miracle of having reached him. The doctor had visited briefly, mentioning cautious optimism, words that seemed impossible hours earlier. Back at the airport, the ripple effect continued. Michael, who had escorted Rachel to her flight, returned to his counter with a subtle shift in demeanor. His interactions with subsequent passengers carried a new attentiveness, a recognition of the humans behind the transactions. The teenage girls sat at their gate, unusually quiet, scrolling through their social media feeds. They had posted their video of Keanu's kindness, but with a caption that reflected unexpected self-awareness. Saw someone being cruel today, us included, and then saw what real kindness looks like. Do better. Be better. The businessman with the platinum card made a phone call while waiting for his delayed flight. "Hey, I need to reschedule tomorrow's meeting," he said, his voice carrying new resolve. "Going to take a detour to visit my dad." "No, nothing's wrong. Just been too long." Around him, other passengers who had witnessed the earlier scene seemed changed in small but significant ways. A woman offered her phone charger to a stressed mother whose battery had died. An elderly gentleman struggling with his bag found 3 people simultaneously offering assistance. The terminal, normally a place of isolated journeys and parallel lives, had temporarily transformed into something more connected. 3 days later, Rachel's father opened his eyes and squeezed her hand. The doctors called it remarkable progress. That same evening, she borrowed her sister's laptop and made a small donation to a cancer research foundation Keanu had quietly supported after losing someone to the disease. It wasn't about paying him back. It was about understanding what he had truly given her. Not just a plane ticket, but a reminder of our capacity for compassion, especially when no cameras are rolling. The airport videos continued to spread, sparking conversations about celebrity, kindness, and authenticity. But unlike most viral content, these discussions went deeper, lasted longer, touched something essential. In comment sections and living rooms, people recognized something they hungered for: genuine human connection in an increasingly performative world. Most never learned that Rachel had reached her father in time, that their hands had clasped before it was too late. That part of the story remained private, unrecorded. On another continent, Keanu Reeves sat in another airport reading another book. If he was aware of the latest wave of internet adoration, he showed no sign of it. A child approached cautiously, parents hovering nervously behind. "Are you the airport man?" the child asked innocently, clearly repeating something overheard. Keanu smiled that particular smile, genuine but humble. "Sometimes," he answered simply. "We all are, when we need to be." The child nodded, satisfied with an answer they didn't fully understand but somehow recognized as true. The parents mouthed silent thanks for both the moment and the lesson before gently guiding their child away. Wow, what a story! If this moved you, imagine what else we have for you. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and let us know what you think.